It's 7 o'clock. I should probably call the meeting to order. And the first item is approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
And I note that there's a change to the agenda, removing item 14, FY21 year-to-date budget reports. Are there any other requested changes, amendments to the agenda? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the agenda with the one minor change, signify with thumbs up. Okay. Next is approval of the minutes of our September 22nd regular select board meeting.
Moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Are there any amendments to the draft minutes? Okay, hearing none, all in favor of approving the September 22nd draft minutes, signify with thumbs up.
No, abstain, Brian, because I wasn't there.
Yep, okay. So 4-1 abstention. Next is citizen comments, and just a reminder, you can raise your hand if there's anyone that's new that's on, and Chris will recognize and let me know and admit you to the meeting.
Okay, Brian, we have 3 so far raised hands. The first one is from Dave Silberman. Dave, I'm going to unmute you, or you can unmute yourself. Go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted to make the board aware, if they have not seen the news, that Act 164 has gone into law. That is an act relating to the regulation of cannabis. As part of that act, Section 863 states that prior to a cannabis retailer being allowed to open within any municipality, that municipality must approve the opening of any cannabis retailers. That's not a particular one, but just conceptually, whether or not retailers may open. And that approval must be via Australian ballot vote at the annual or special town meeting. I wanted to make the board aware of that. I also want to request that the board consider adding that item to our town meeting 2021 ballot. I think it will be important to get that approval out of the way quickly, and helpful to do that in the regular annual town meeting rather than having a special meeting and necessitating a balloted election in the middle of the year, especially as the pandemic will be ongoing, unfortunately. And so that's it. Thank you very much for letting me bring that to your attention and to make that request of you.
Dave, before you drop off, could you tell us what the date? I saw that they had passed that, but I'm not fully clear when that is, when the implementation date is, when that law becomes effective.
Sure. Different sections of that law become effective at different times. If your specific concern is when will retailers be allowed to open, then that is May of 2022 if our medical dispensary wanted to convert to adult sales. I've spoken with the owner of our medical dispensary here in town. He likely will not do that. And for other licensees, that date will be October 2022. I think it's still important to get it out of the way in 2021 because there's a lot of lead time associated with starting up a business like this. And also the law allows municipalities to establish local commissions to regulate those establishments within the municipality. That regulatory authority is limited to basically planning and zoning and sign compliance. So the municipal authority is quite limited, but you do have that authority within planning and zoning to regulate those businesses. And I suspect that this body will want to spend some time thinking about that. And so having that approval in advance will give you guys maximal time to think through that, you know, between March 2021 and October 2022.
Okay, Dave, thank you for your input. Does anybody have a question of Dave on that? Okay. All right.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Chris, who's next?
Okay, Brian, next up we have David Pistilli. You can go ahead, sir.
Good evening, Dave.
You're muted.
Dave, you may need to unmute your microphone in the lower left corner of the screen.
I think he's got it.
And I think I've selected the button in the middle. I hope I did the right thing. Chris, I want to say first of all, if Heather Viennes is on, I do not want to steal her thunder. So, Chris, I don't know if she's on this call or not.
Heather is on the call and her hand is raised, so she'll be up next.
Okay, I hope I don't steal her thunder, but I know that Heather made us aware, and Heather made, I think, most of the select board aware of an incident last week where a pet was struck and killed by a speeding motorist on South Street. As two of my pets have been struck and killed on South Street. And I know that the South Street has a long history, and the board is well aware of the issues associated with that. So I'm not here to debate that. What I wanted to do was, first and foremost, thank Kathleen for quick action, I think, to muster the resources that could be made available when they weren't, to thank the Tom Hanley, the chief of police, for posting someone to work to enforce the speed limit. And I think whoever the patrolman was caught motorists by all accounts right and left as soon as he or she was posted. So it's fertile ground for enforcement. But I know Tom can enforce everything everywhere all the time. I also know that Tom has wedged or proposed to wedge into his budget for next year a feedback sign to motorists that would alert them about their speed as they travel down the street. I would offer that needs to be on both sides of the street at a minimum. And I do think that that's an appropriate response. I think most people, it seems to me, when informed about the fact that they're speeding, and the road does encourage speeding, I get the reasons for it, they tend to regulate themselves. And it would bring, I think the documentation is strong that it works in most places that it's installed. I would offer that in the short term, and I think Heather was going to propose this, that there be additional striping at the crosswalks, or additional the making of the crosswalks much more visible to motorists by highlighting them. Some have proposed bump outs. I don't want to get into all that, but I do think that if the crosswalks were made more visible by solid painting within them or something like that in the short term, and by the way, I very much appreciate the speed limit sign striping that's on the road. I think that's also appropriate. I think that would also let people know that they're entering this pedestrian/animal zone and they need to control their speed. And with that, I'll let, I would very much like to let Heather say her piece.
Okay, Heather, you can unmute your microphone.
Hello, thank you for this opportunity to share a serious concern. We've lived on South Street for 25 years, and the speed limit is posted. It is 25 miles an hour. And 2 weeks ago, our daughter was in the crosswalk in front of our home when a car sped through. 1 week ago, a dog was hit and killed in front of our home, and the motorist never stopped. It didn't even slow down. And this is seriously disturbing. We are on a walking school route, and we have so many families and pets in this area. And I think that drivers have become regular drivers with 3 major employers at the end of our street. And that includes drivers who are driving semis for delivery and vendors and service. They've become desensitized to the fact that they're traveling through a neighborhood. And this is a neighborhood that has 4 crosswalks. And it is state law to stop for someone in a crosswalk. The crosswalks, I feel, as David shared, should be colored. I've seen it work very effectively with bike lanes in the Burlington area. The crosswalks or lanes are green, and they stand out, and it's just a heightened awareness that doesn't cost a lot and lets people know, watch out, there's a crosswalk. And I feel strongly that the speed awareness signs, where it flashes your speed, it makes you aware of how fast you're going, and it does slow you down. And I appreciate very much the police department. After I wrote the letter to the select board, there was a cruiser out across from my home that afternoon, and he did catch speeding drivers left and right, as David said. And the next morning he was there. And I realized that that can't be every day, but it certainly impeded the amount of speeding drivers. And we have a high volume of traffic, and the street was widened, and people just, I think, feel it's a kind of a thoroughfare to just go right down the street wherever they're headed. But the close call with our daughter and the tragic loss of someone's member of their family with that dog, it needs to be addressed. And I would like you to, I'm not suggesting, I'm requesting that we do something for the street and the neighborhood. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you both. And Kathleen, would you like to say anything about this, or is Chief on right now? I don't know if Chief's in there.
Chief is on.
Chief's here.
Okay, Chief, would you like to address that at all?
Yeah, this is a problem that's consistent around town. As long as we have a design speed on the road, which is much higher than the posted speed limit, we're going to have speed problems. In other words, East Main Street and East Middlebury, design speed on that road is about 50 miles an hour. People are going to drive the rate that they see comfortable. South Street, the design speed on that road is probably 35 to 40 miles an hour. And thus we get cars going that fast. We do know that 85% of the drivers are going to drive at a speed that they feel comfortable driving. The other 15 are going to be out of control. And when that happens, it requires, give it to the cops to fix the problem. And we can't be there with only 2 officers on duty at any one time at all these streets while handling complaints and accidents and all kinds of other things. We give it attention when we can, and it's largely ineffective. We've been able to, during the daytime, at least have somebody out there on South Street, but likewise getting complaints on Weybridge Street, Seymour Street, Seminary Street, and on and on and on, Painter Road, Washington Street, the same type of complaints. And it's just, there's only so much we can do with the resources that we have. So as again, I've said this many, many times before, when there's a road construction project, design the road for higher speeds, and it doesn't matter what you put for a speed limit, you're going to get higher speeds. And it's going to be to the police to go out and periodically go out and try to deal with the issue. But it's hard to be there all the time when we need to be there. We've tried some technology with some of our speed boxes, which will record really abhorrent speeds. At least it'll give us an indication over a period of weeks on specific times when there might be 1 or 2 violators. But when the speed of the road is going 40 and a 25, and your speed studies show 35 to 40, that's pretty tough to try to nail down to any specific time.
Chief, do you think that the flashing placards would help that?
Yeah, they do. I think they've helped in East Middlebury. Speed studies since that was put up have brought that speed down a couple of miles an hour. When you're dealing with thousands and thousands of cars, it really takes a lot to make drastic changes. I think it does help. I think it's an awareness. Just so you know, those permanent installations are very, very expensive. I think that one on East Main Street cost us about $7,000 with the installation. And so be prepared. These things do cost a lot of money.
Kathleen, what's a bump out cost? Have you got any recollection what one of those?
I don't. The infrastructure committee did talk about very briefly about the possibility of doing a demonstration project, as they've done in Bethel and other communities, bringing in temporary bump outs to see what that looks like. Unfortunately, we're bumping up right against the winter, so it might be good to plan something like that for the spring.
Okay. Did you raise your hand, Heather? No, okay.
That was me. Again,
Okay.
just a final comment. A success story is Route 125 going through the college campus. It used to be a speedway through there, and when the college put that effort into putting out those bump outs and the way the parking is, speeds have slowed dramatically down and permanently on 125 through the campus. So, I mean, that's an example of what works.
Okay. Just for Dave and Heather's and any of the other South Street residents' knowledge, we talked with the college and Porter, and they've both put out to their employees a notice to do a better job of acknowledging what the speed limit is and what's appropriate speed for the road. Recognizing there are emergency vehicles that sometimes might go faster, but they do realize that they're part of the issue there and are doing what they feel they can to try to help us. So sounds like something that needs some good ideas. Is that something that we would refer to the infrastructure committee, Kathleen?
Yes, and as Chief mentioned, he'll be including that in his budget, the driver feedback sign in his budget proposal for FY22.
Okay. All right. Chris, is there anybody else with a raised hand?
Brian, I see David has his hand raised again. I'm not sure if that was a mistake. Let me just unmute, ask him to unmute real quick, see if he had anything to add.
No, Chris, thank you.
Okay.
I did want to add, again, I think it needs to be for two signs. I believe we're all saying the same thing, that we're in violent agreement. And I think that the money would be well spent to prevent the loss of life to a human being. I think $14,000, if that's what it takes, would be worthwhile to save a human being's life. And I don't mean to diminish the lives of the animals. Whoever specified that sign in East Middlebury, that is the best sign in the state, I think. That sign always works. It works perfectly. And so if we could get two more of those, I would be really happy. The last thing that I wanted to add is there is an element of road rage that factors in here. I, like many of my neighbors, walk the street or bike the street, and I have used a hand and arm signals in the past to tell people to slow down. I don't have a radar gun in my head, but it's not hard to tell when somebody's going 35 or 45 rather than 25. And I've been subject to a fair amount of feedback from motorists to tell me to mind my own business. I've even had some turn back around and tell me that we're going to, and I would welcome the confrontation. Tom Hanley would tell me not to, but there's this sense of that these people deserve to be able to speed on this road. And I dare say it's not the majority of the employees at Porter Hospital or at Eastview or at Middlebury College. It seems to me to be either, whatever the reason is, there are some people who think they deserve to speed And that's where the enforcement part comes in. I understand that the chief can enforce his way to compliance everywhere in the town, but strategically and tactically, he's making a difference.
Okay, thank you, Dave. So we'll be working on it.
Brian, we have a raised hand from Fred Dunnington. Go ahead, Fred.
Evening, Fred.
Hi. Excuse me, let me turn off what's causing the echo here. Can you hear me all right? Can you hear me all right?
You've got a bad echo, Fred.
Jesus, I don't know why.
Fred, I see that you have two devices on, so perhaps you turn the volume off on one of them or turn the other off.
Well, how's that? Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I realized I sent the select board a letter tonight around dinner time. I'm sorry for that. I realize it's an issue on the Riverwalk, and I realize this is a subject that's more involved that you can get into in the citizen comments. Really what I wanted to do here just in this moment is apologize. In my exasperation over things that I thought perhaps the board or town officials weren't aware of on this Riverwalk and the possibilities. I wrote something, and I regret saying that I thought town officials just didn't care to push back on this. But so anyway, I wanted to apologize personally for that. And the letter speaks for itself. There seems to be quite a bit of community interest in the idea of a path along the river, and so I wrote a rather long letter about it, and I'll let you digest that. And again, I'm sorry. I know you do care about the town a lot. You do. I really commend you for all your work. And I realize Jim Gish is on vacation. So anyway, I just wanted to say that publicly, and thank you, and let me know what you think about the letter I wrote.
Fred, I appreciate the apology. I read the Front Porch Forum and kind of blew a cork. I was quite disappointed. It's a lot more complex than many people feel this issue is. It's a really nice thought, but it's not anything new. We'll have some more discussions about it. We'll put it on the agenda. We're not going to go into it this evening. But I appreciate the letter, because I know the town officials care deeply and are doing their best. But this is a pretty large project if it's going to be done to do it right, other than just a little sitting spot, which also covers at-grade crossings on a live rail, which will be carrying passenger rail, not just freight. And so it's a very complex subject, and I think that the people are either misinformed if they think that we haven't tried, or maybe a little bit of the COVID restlessness. So appreciate your apology, and we'll have some discussion and make sure you know when it's going on. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Fred. All right. Next, we've got Chief Hanley with the local emergency management update.
Okay, mostly good news. The college up to today is not reporting any new cases and no current active cases. 2 former cases they had with students have recovered. The 2 former employee cases have also recovered. As of October 12th, they've done over 8,500 tests, and on they go. We did get a complaint of a loud student party with comings and goings on Saturday night, which turned out to be a false report. This is a thing we seem to be having to deal with more. Officers were there within 2 minutes of the call, and there was nobody there. There was 2 residents in the house playing some music, and that was it. There was nothing going on. So if you hear rumors of that, That is a false complaint. Right now, we're holding steady in Middlebury with 9 aggregate positive cases since March. We haven't seen that number go up, so we remain in good shape here. A little concerned about what's going on in the region, and it just reinforces the fact that we have to remain vigilant and careful. Most of the states and counties in the region outside of Vermont are in bad shape. They've seen increases. If you go to the ACCD travel map, you'll see everything is red or orange surrounding us. Big sections of New Hampshire, Eastern Maine, essentially the rest of New England, New York, and outside of the immediate region down to Pennsylvania, Ohio, which tells us that anybody wanting to come to Vermont is going to have to quarantine when they come here. And anybody here that has designs of leaving Vermont to go on vacation really is going to have to quarantine on return. So that's going to make things a little economically sluggish. The point is, stay home, stay here in Vermont. There's a lot to do, and stay healthy. Keep our numbers down. We have 5 schools in the state reporting COVID infections. According to Dr. Levine, they don't appear to be in-school transmission. They were picked up elsewhere, including in Montpelier, where 12 hockey players at different age groups have been tested positive, and we expect that number to go up. So this is what happens when you get a little cavalier, and we don't want that to happen here. So I think we all have to reinforce that with everybody as often as we can, and I'll continue to do it with the bulletins, that we need to stay cautious and wear our masks so that we don't have the repeat of what's going on everywhere else. And that's about it. And of course, you saw that in the Guard too, they've got a little bit of an outbreak in the National Guard from going on training deployments and mixing with people from around the country. And they're bringing back COVID when they go. So a little concerning, but we're in good shape here and we want to stay that way. And that's about it.
Thanks, Chief. Any questions of Chief? Okay. Keep up the good work, Chief.
Thank you.
Next, we have a public hearing on the closeout of the Vermont Community Development Planning Grant for the completion of a septic system feasibility analysis for the Lindale Mobile Home Park. Long topic, but I'm going to go ahead and open the public meeting now at 7:27. If anyone would like to make a comment, please use the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom window. And when you're recognized, please state your full name so that it can be entered in the public record for this meeting. We're going to start by having Isaac Wagner, principal of Wagner Development Partners, to go through what the situation is, and from there, others can make comments, and we may have questions of him. Hi, Isaac.
Hi, everybody. So I'll keep it executive summary brief for everybody, and then I can expand if there's questions either from the public or the board. The Community Development Block Grant was a planning grant applied for on behalf of the Addison County Community Trust by the town of Middlebury back in 2018. We finally got to a grant agreement on this project and got started on it in early 2019. And since that time, we've been conducting a feasibility study at the Lindale Mobile Home Park out on Case Street. That park is experiencing a pretty challenging situation with regards to their septic systems. They're failing at a pretty high rate. They have poor soils and very little opportunity to replace those systems. Very little opportunity to connect to the town's system too far out. And they really needed to do some research into what the options were. And as such, we applied for this grant, and we have completed that feasibility study, which has resulted in a feasibility plan to place a large community septic system on the property with leach fields on the abutting property that has yet to be acquired. But that's the concept at this point. We found good soils. We've done wetland mapping. We've done property surveying. We've done engineering, site engineering for the site, and our contractor for that was Otter Creek Engineering right down the street. And so at this stage in the game, we've completed the activities we set out to do with that planning grant. We still have a lot left to do in that park, but we've completed what we set out to do with the planning grant. And we would like to go through this prescribed process to close it out. And part of that process includes this public hearing right here. So with that executive summary, I'd like to leave it open to one more thing quickly. I just want to let the board know that the Addison County Community Trust really appreciates sponsoring this and supporting this project with the revolving loan fund that you assisted us with match on this grant. And I personally really appreciate all Kathleen's support, because I really badger her with really nitpicky stuff on a seemingly daily basis regarding this grant. These grants are a heavy bureaucratic burden for a relatively small grant. So no matter how much we try to insulate the towns from that detail work, it ends up happening anyway. So she's been very patient and helpful on this as well.
Thank you, Isaac. Chris, have we got any hands raised?
We have one hand raised from Judy Weiger-Groves.
Okay.
Judy, go ahead.
Judy, yep.
Yep. But I want to go back to road safety. And I raised my hand.
Judy, I can't, we can take that up at another time, but right now we're in a public hearing, so I need to keep the comments to the public hearing.
So, Brian, I raised my hand when comments were being entertained about road safety.
Well, let me just finish this, and we can come back to you on this. We're in a public hearing, so let me finish the public hearing.
Okay. I don't think that's quite fair, because I wasn't recognized earlier.
I said I'll come back to you, Judy.
Yep. Okay.
We have no other hands at this time. Brian?
So there's no questions. Is there any questions of the board on this? I think it's something we're continuing to support, the way I understand it. And if you've got everything you need from the board, Isaac?
I think so. Over the next couple of weeks, Kathleen, over the next couple of weeks, we're going to try to do a final draw, and we're going to do the additional closeout paperwork. I'll need minutes from this meeting as well as an attendance list. I'm not sure how we're doing attendance lists these days, but it sounds like compared to, I work with a lot of towns, you guys seem to have this Zoom thing worked out much better than any other town I've spoken with recently. So I'll trust you have it figured out. Other than that, again, thank you very much, and we really appreciated the help.
Okay, thank you, Isaac. So I'll close the hearing at 7:33. And before we go to Ideal, Chris, could you let Judy back in here?
Yes, I will. Let me just get back over to...
I think she left.
She left?
She's not on. I don't see her.
She's dropped off a couple of times. I don't know if she's having connectivity issues or not, but she's not currently there.
She isn't. Okay. All right. So then if we have Ideal, we have a presentation that, will they be sharing their?
Yes, I'm taking a moment to make them all presenters, and then they can begin.
Hi, everyone. I'm just going to take a few moments to share our screen, and then we will begin our presentation.
Perfect.
Hello, Middlebury Select Board. We are Janae Dew, Matthew Delia Lobo, and Joanna Caldwell from Ideal Middlebury. Ideal stands for invest, divest, educate, abolish, liberate. We are a collective of Addison County residents working to reduce systemic harm by creating new policies, structures, and accountability measures for the town of Middlebury. Our presentation this evening looks at white supremacy in the United States, nationally, in our region and state, and locally right here in Middlebury. Please know that we'll be sharing all of this material with you in the coming week so that you'll be able to see our sources and delve deeper into the data that we provide. Thank you for inviting us to speak with you tonight. We ask that you listen to us with open minds and open hearts. When we talk about criminalization in the United States, we have to talk about power, who has it and who doesn't. The history of criminalization in the US shows that at every turn, police have been used to enforce the power structure and uphold the status quo, no matter how unjust or undemocratic. We're going to take a brief chronological journey to understand some of the ways that criminalization and the police have been used throughout US history to uphold unequal power structures and white supremacy. Slave patrols were one of the earliest and most prolific forms of early policing in the South. The responsibility of patrols was straightforward: to control the movements and behaviors of enslaved populations. The Texas Rangers, founded in 1823, used violence and intimidation to push indigenous people off land that newly arriving white colonists wanted to claim as their own. Mexican people and Native American people who resisted the Rangers' authority could be killed, beaten, or arrested. The end of the Civil War and the ratification of the 13th Amendment marked the end of the system of chattel slavery. However, from 1865 through today, systemic racism has been perpetuated by a variety of strategies. These have been marked by an increasing finesse and ability to hide in plain sight, in particular from white people. One strategy is embodied in the 13th Amendment, which prohibits slavery except as a punishment for crime. This clause allowed the Southern economy, which was in tatters after the Civil War and now was without the free labor of an enslaved workforce, to recapture this labor force by criminalizing Black people into a new form of slavery. The publication Abolition Journal offers this historical summary. Following emancipation, the Black codes, the growth of a prison plantation system, and the rise of white vigilante groups all enshrine the criminalization of Blackness as the method to extend racial hierarchy. As Jim Crow was solidified and Black people fled the violence of the South in the early to mid 20th century, police were key to securing segregation and racial oppression across the United States. Historian Khalil Gibran Muhammad describes the early United States police force as, quote, a critical feature of establishing a racial hierarchy even among white people, unquote, as immigrants and ethnic white populations became subjects for racist, classist policing. Police were used by wealthy factory, mine, and farm owners to break strikes and attempt to crush unions. Police used extreme violence to disperse demonstrating workers, and they also used trivial public order offenses to arrest staggering numbers of working people. In Chicago, a viciously anti-labor police force hauled nearly 1 million people off to jail between 1875 and 1900. And now we're going to fast forward up to today, or to much closer to today. In the 1980s and 1990s, President Reagan's war on drugs and President Clinton's tough on crime policies enabled police departments to use numerous tactics to attack and criminalize specific groups of people. Journalist Nedra Karim Nittel writes, "Those in power have used the criminal justice system as a vehicle to strip African Americans of their liberty. This includes the glaring sentencing disparities between crack and powder cocaine, a higher police presence in Black neighborhoods, and a bail system that requires those arrested to pay for their release from jail or remain incarcerated. The racist prison industrial complex harms everyone. African Americans make up 13% of the American population, but 40% of the prison populace. While a white male has a 1 in 17 chance of ending up behind bars, for Black males, it is 1 in 3. As former President Barack Obama said, the United States is home to 5% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's prisoners. A 2012 New Yorker article by Adam Gopnik stated, overall, there are now more people under correctional supervision in America, more than 6 million, than were in the Gulag archipelago under Stalin at its height. At every stage in the history of the United States, police have served to protect the interests of wealthy elites and to enforce the status quo, be that slavery, Jim Crow laws, border policing, unequal rights for women, persecution of queer and trans people, or the unjust labor laws that kept factory workers, miners, and field laborers from organizing for their human rights.
People like to think of Vermont as a progressive place, but when it comes to racism, there are unfortunately plenty of contradictory examples, including several examples that are touted as positive, but when viewed in context, that doesn't quite hold true. For example, Vermont was the first state to abolish slavery. However, this was conditional to those who were 21 and older. Alexander Twilight was the first Black graduate in the country, but Middlebury College was unaware of his race at the time of admittance. Middlebury College then denied admission to Black student Andrew Harris some 15 years later due to his race. Frederick Douglass came to speak about slavery abolition in 1843, yet he was harassed, called racial slurs, and only 6 people attended his event. In 1925, a KKK rally was held in Montpelier that drew in a crowd of 10,000 people. Reverend David Lee Johnson and his family moved to Irisburg, Vermont in 1968 to escape racial prosecution. However, night raiders fired shots into their home shortly after they arrived. Police did not immediately arrest the perpetrator and instead investigated Johnson's background. After continued hate mail, the Johnson family moved out of Vermont in 1969. What also makes the previous information of contradictory progress so disheartening is Vermont's racial makeup during and after the Great Migration. From 1890 to 1930, the U.S. Black population increased 60%. Between 1915 and 1930, more than 1 million African Americans moved from the South to the North, which was referred to as the Great Migration. In fact, prior to 1930, Vermont had no all-white counties. Yet, after 1930, counties across New England became whiter. This coincides with the large 1925 KKK rally mentioned on the previous slide. This map here shows the first waves of migration. On the left, you'll notice purple circles in New England, which shows that the Black population was actually decreasing despite the overall move towards the north. Why do you think that was? Both overt and covert racism pushed Black residents towards urban areas. For example, starting in 1905, restrictive covenants began appearing in property deeds that limited property sales and occupancy to only white people. Pictured is language from a property covenant in Williamstown, Massachusetts from 1939 that limited the property to only white residents. It reads, "No persons of any race other than the white race shall use or occupy any buildings or any lot, except that this covenant shall not prevent occupancy by domestic servants of a different race domiciled with an owner or tenant." Although these racist housing codes have not been legally enforceable since the 1960s, this language still exists in some deeds and covenants today. For example, 7 Days reported in 2004 that South Burlington resident Sarah Judd encountered almost the exact language pictured here in paperwork for a house she was considering buying in a subdivision there. What message does that send to Vermont residents of color trying to buy property? Racist covenants and property deeds were not the only things keeping Black people from Vermont. Sundown towns affected the livelihoods of Black people across Northeast towns and cities. Sundown towns are municipalities that prevented African Americans or other minoritized people from lingering after dark using violence, intimidation, and over-policing. You may have seen Black coming-of-age movies or sitcoms where a portion of the storyline is the kids racing home before the streetlights come on. It can seem innocent, funny even, watching the kids rush home to beat curfew. When you know the history of sundown towns, it becomes much more insidious. Black children were expected to be in the house before the last streetlight came on because it was not safe for Black people to be out after dark. Breaking curfew could result in harassment, assault, or death. Off to the right are 4 examples from New England sundown towns, including Quincy, Massachusetts, Burlington, Connecticut, and Portland, Connecticut. Sundown towns may seem historical, but the last image you see on the right is from 1973, where it is explicit in writing that racially minoritized people were not welcome in Ashby, Massachusetts. The image above on this slide was found by historians and is a sign that hung in a Connecticut town saying whites only within city limits after dark. However, sundown towns still exist today. University of Vermont sociologist James Lowen maintains a database of reported sundown towns, and there are 7 possible sundown towns in Vermont, including Bellows Falls, Colchester, Morrisville, Pulteney, Swanton, Tunbridge, and Waterbury. The acts of racism are not only attributed to these possible sundown towns and can happen in any town within Vermont. Kaya Morris of Bennington County was racially harassed by Max Mish and other white supremacists, ultimately resulting in Morris's ending of her re-election campaign from the House of Representatives in 2018. The case is still being investigated today. Similarly, Tabitha Moore, of the president of the Rutland area NAACP, received numerous threats that resulted in her family selling their home, moving quickly, and ending her campaign for high bailiff. I personally have been harassed in town in Middlebury by a white man with a racist agenda. When I politely asked him to leave my friends alone, he accused me of being aggressive. And this is after he said, "Just because I don't think Black lives don't matter, that doesn't mean I don't get a right to free speech." This is a direct threat to my safety. We see what happens when white people claim aggression of Black people, and it usually ends up with the Black people arrested, beaten, or dead. These incidents are not isolated. There has been Black Lives Matter mural vandalism in Montpelier and racist graffiti in Middlebury, among other things. All of this signifies a threat and a lack of safety for Black, Indigenous, and other people of color in the community. As we continue with the presentation, we will be speaking specifically about the racism in Vermont, in the Vermont Police Department and the Sheriff Departments, including Addison County and Middlebury.
When we focus on Vermont-specific data regarding racial disparities in policing and incarceration, the evidence points again and again to obvious racial bias in our law enforcement. For example, Vermont has the highest rate of adult Black male incarceration out of all 50 states, 1 in 14. That number does not include Vermont residents in federal prisons or jails, just those in state prisons. The rate of black imprisonment here is more than 10.5 times that for whites. These statistics alone show Vermont's serious systemic racial bias in law enforcement. For another example of the obvious disparity in racially biased policing, we can look at traffic stops and searches. In Vermont, Black and Hispanic drivers continue to be roughly 2.5 to 4.6 times more likely to be searched than white drivers, despite being 30 to 50% less likely to be found with contraband subsequent to a search than white drivers. The following graphs reflect data collected between 2014 and 2017 as discussed in UVM professor Dr. Stephanie Seguino's 2017 paper entitled Driving While Black and Brown in Vermont. This is the most comprehensive data reflecting specifically on traffic stops in Vermont, Addison County, and Middlebury that we have access to at this time, and we think that it shows extremely compelling evidence that Black and Brown residents in Middlebury and the surrounding areas experience an unfair amount of policing when compared to white residents. This particular graph shows the likelihood of a traffic stop by race compared to the total share of population that race has in different Vermont towns and counties. Stop rates above the red line reflect overstopping of Black drivers relative to their share of the population. This graph shows that Black drivers are stopped by the Middlebury Police Department at a rate that is over 1.5 times their estimated share of the Middlebury population, and just under 1.5 times their share of the population are stopped in Addison County by the Addison County Sheriff's Department. This graph shows the percentage of Black male traffic stops relative to white male traffic stops. Here we can see that Black male drivers are proportionally more likely to be stopped than white male drivers in Vermont in general, and we have the specific percentage of disproportionate stops made for Black drivers than white drivers by Middlebury Police and by Addison County Police. This disparity we see solidifies the idea that there is bias in policing on the local level. This graph shows Middlebury-specific data reflecting the disproportionate stops of Black drivers relative to their share of the driving population by specific officers on the force. The x-axis is specific to one of 7 individual officers. Stop rates above the red line reflect overstopping of Black drivers relative to their share of the population. We can see that 6 of the officers in this data set pulled over Black drivers at a disproportionate rate to the percentage of the driving population in Middlebury. 4 of the officers pulled over Black drivers at a rate of about 2 times their population, meaning that they were pulling over Black drivers twice as often as would have been expected based on how many Black drivers there were. This graph displays the percentage of officers with Black stop rates 50% or more of that agency's Black driving population. We see that within the Addison County Sheriff's Department, the percentage is 38. Within the Middlebury Police Department, it is 56%. The report itself sums it up succinctly. These results indicate that the disparity in Black and white stop rates at the agency level cannot be attributed to the isolated behavior of just a few officers. Rather, one might conclude, after reviewing these data, that there are widespread behavior and practices within agencies contributing to these patterns that will need to be addressed if disparities are to be reduced. In the data from the Addison County Sheriff's Department from the years 2014 to 2017, we can clearly see that this problem exists here in Addison County as well. Black drivers, who made up 1.6% of area drivers, were 2.1% of the traffic stops, a 128.7% disparity, and Hispanic drivers made up 0.4% of area drivers but were 0.9% of the traffic stops, a 234.4% disparity. When we look at traffic stops and searches of Addison County male drivers specifically during this time, we see that the white male stop rate is 63.4% versus the Black male stop rate of 86.6% and the Hispanic male stop rate of 77%. Here, too, these stops led to more searches of people of color than white drivers, with white males searched at a rate of 0.3% versus the Black male search rate of 1.5% and the Hispanic male search rate of 6.6%. This graph shows the Middlebury Police budget versus the town's total contribution toward the health and social services from 2010 to 2021. The dip you see in 2015 in the police budget reflects employee benefits being moved from the total police budget to another place in the town budget, not a decrease in funding for the police. With all the information we have about the police and how they have functioned historically and do currently function in our country, state, and town, we think it's worth posing the question: does our police budget reflect the needs of all members of our community, or just some of them? While our health and social services, which could be better suited to handling many of the situations the police currently handle without racial bias, receive such a meager share from our town's budget, it's worth thinking about reframing how we deal with things in our community. And that needs to start with understanding how the full picture looks for all community members, not just the majority. With this data and much more that we can provide, there is no question of racially biased policing on the state and local level. This issue is a systemic problem which exists within the criminal justice system everywhere, and Middlebury is no exception. Law enforcement harms people of color disproportionately in the US, in Vermont, and in Middlebury because the system is built on a structure of racism and bias, and the carceral system feeds on it. We do not want this system to be in place for our community any longer, and I urge you to consider this when making future budgetary decisions.
Additionally, we list here a few steps for you all to take to learn more and do more to combat racism within the Middlebury community. We have a few suggested resources hyperlinked, including the Zinn Education Project and the Abolition Syllabus. There is also an opportunity to attend an Abolition House Party, which we can provide more information about if there is interest. Again, we will provide this presentation to you with the hyperlinks and all of the information within the next week. We request you all commit yourselves to learning about racism in the community. This means active listening to Black, Indigenous, and people of color community members and making conscious decisions that will benefit their lives. We also ask you all to deeply consider reducing the Middlebury Police Department budget in order to better support social services, including additional budget requests throughout the year. We urge you to understand that there are racist and anti-racist choices, including budgetary ones. Continuing to fund the police department is a racist one. Thank you for your time, and we are now open for questions in the remaining time you have allotted us.
Can we get so we can see the board again? There we go. Okay, thank you. Questions of the board, from the board? Lindsay.
Not really a question. I just wanted to thank Ideal Middlebury for what I imagine was an incredible amount of work to get all that information put together. So I look forward to going through it more slowly, but I really appreciate. I'm sure you could count the hours, but I'm sure it was a great number of hours. So we really appreciate your help.
If there, yeah, Nick.
Am I unmuted? Okay. I also appreciate the information, and it is something to food for thought. I don't know if I'd go so far as to say, though, funding the police department is a racist endeavor, because when I look at what our police officers do, they're the people who respond when there's an accident. There's the people who respond when there's a search and rescue, and it's for everybody. They do respond when people are having health difficulties. We can't eliminate them because they are a critical part of keeping us all safe. If there are specific issues that need to be addressed, and we certainly would like to know the details of those so that they could be properly addressed. But I don't believe the idea, especially since it's a small force as it is, and there's on average 2 officers on the street safeguarding us, that I could concur with the comment that our support of them is a racist action. And so once again, if we have specific issues, that's what I really want to know about so that we can help to eliminate them. But to make that broad comment in our town, I know our police chief has been extremely aware of these issues for years. And I've actually had the opportunity to sit on some interview boards for future officers. And that's something that they look for extremely carefully for characteristics that would lead us to an officer that would bring in a bias and threaten the safety and health, well-being of our entire community. So once again, I appreciate the effort, but if there are specific issues, that's really what I would like to know so that we can take positive steps to put an end to those.
I would just like to say that safety is relative and very subjective based on the community member. And I'm assuming that you are a white man in Middlebury, so I don't doubt that you feel safe within this community. But for a lot of BIPOC or Black, Indigenous, and people of color who live here, the presence of police is not a sense of safety. It actually causes a great deal of stress and fear. So while I respect what you were saying, that is not the lived reality or experiences of a lot of BIPOC community members here within Middlebury. I also would like to say that the police as a system are racist. And I understand that you may know Chief Hanley, you may know other officers who are in the police department here in Middlebury, but that does not negate the fact that the system of policing is racist. And that's all we're trying to get you here to do. So once you are able to further up with the rest of the education that we have provided you in this presentation, I hope you're able to learn a little bit more and expand your mind and hopefully expand your thoughts and hopefully be able to understand where we're coming from when we say that racism is embedded in the police and that supporting the continual funding of the police is a racist act.
Okay, well, once again, I will listen to and carefully follow through with what you have provided, and I appreciate that. But once again, and look at these specific ways, I take an empathetic view. I am of a working class, not too far long ago, immigrant family who were in those people that you mentioned who were unions, who were locked out. I mean, I have family who was United Mine Workers, United Auto Workers, Brotherhood of Railway. So they've all experienced that. And it was something that was drilled into me from the time I was a child, that these were things one had to, I was not of a privileged class. Now, again, we'll look at, I would like to know specific issues to support that in our town so that we can resolve them, but realize that police serve many, many functions for everybody, including, once again, if you're in an auto accident, they're the ones who come and help. If there's a search and rescue or somebody is lost, they're the ones who are there. And so we always can strive to make things better, and we should never think we can't. But we need to look at things objectively and make sure that we are serving everybody properly. So appreciate the information, and we'll look at this carefully.
I would just like to also add that with our goals here, it is to help the police not have to do all of this work. They shouldn't be the ones going to help people with auto accidents and medical needs and mental health crises and all of these things. And I know that Chief Hanley has made this abundantly clear as well, that they are spread thin. So our goal here is to take the budget from the police, to, reduce the police budget and put that into social services that then would be able to help auto accident survivors, mental health, people suffering from mental health crises, and all of that as well. So we're not saying to not care about the community and not care about these people who are affected by different issues. We're saying to reallocate that money into social services that can provide better support for those affected.
Fair enough.
I see Victor has had his hand raised. Victor?
Well, I think we use the term systemic racism, and obviously I think there's a need to look at the entire system in which we have our society organized, and I think that it's deep in white society, and it's something that we should be ashamed of. But I think the feeling of shame is not strong enough to drive it out. But I think it's in some sense you can have social services that are just when you have systemic racism, you can have social services that are just as racist as police services. I mean, it seems to me that it's a deeper problem, and just focusing on one agency and say, well, if we give them less money and give it to someone else, things are going to work better. I'm afraid that's too simplistic. And of course, it points to the next item on our agenda. We as the Select Board have to address the problem of racism. I'm very grateful for the presentation tonight. I think it was informative, and it was moving, and I think it's a good start.
Thank you for having us again. I just want to address one thing, is that while yes, there is systemic racism in many other agencies and other institutions, definitely, other institutions aren't weaponized and have guns and tasers and batons and police force and canines on them that can cause severe psychological and physical harm. So that's all I would like to say. But thank you again for having us here and letting us present to you today.
Before you leave, Chris, is there anybody else that's got their hand raised or anything?
Yes, thank you, Brian. We have two raised hands at this point. First up is Emily Josselson. Emily, go ahead.
Hi, I just wanted to also thank Middlebury Ideal for the incredibly comprehensive presentation, and also to encourage everyone on the board and all of us to try to listen and learn with an open mind and an open heart, rather than allowing some of our fears and defensiveness to cause us to respond quickly in a dismissive way, which might cut us off from the opportunity to really do the kind of deep learning that we all in this country need to be doing. I mean, it's clear, it's become clear over the last few years how uneducated we all grew up in understanding deep-seated systemic racism in our country, and we all are somewhere along the journey of learning what we don't know, and what deeply racist institutional historical beginnings cause through unconscious, perpetuation. So I just really want to encourage us to take a deep breath and to know that there's a lot for us to learn. There's a lot for us to talk about. There's a lot for us to explore. There's so many things that require attention and change. And I would just encourage us to try not to react quickly to reject suggestions, and instead to take the time to listen and learn and read all we can. And thanks again for the presentation.
Thank you, Emily.
Brian, we also have Judy has raised her hand. Go ahead, Judy.
Hi, Judy. Unmute your button, Judy.
Can you hear me?
Yep, gotcha.
Okay, so I guess I want to echo the thoughts of Ideal. I want to echo the thoughts Emily just presented. I guess I have a couple questions. How many on the board have read How to Be Less Stupid About Race? I guess I'm wondering how many members of the board have read White Fragility.
Judy, might a more fair question be how many have started delving in and reading, maybe not one specific book, but there's a plethora of data of information out there, and how many of us have made an effort to start learning, maybe is a maybe more fair question to the board.
Brian, I agree. However, there are readings that focus on racism. There are readings that focus on systemic racism. And having heard this evening, so I grew up in a town where there were, migrant workers. I grew up in a town where there were, people of many races working. That does not make us immune to racism. And I'm still looking for what the board is doing to combat systemic racism in Middlebury. We know it exists. And what are we going to do about it? It's Ryan, and everybody else, it exists here. And so I'm going to go back to a previous comment because I was cut off earlier. I have concerns about speeding on Schoolhouse Hill Road, and you will not cut me off. We're concerned about speeding on South Street Extension. We're concerned about speeding on South Street, but we're obviously not concerned about speeding and taking people out on Schoolhouse Hill Road. I want to know why that is.
I'm not sure I would say that that's.
It is true.
Yeah, I'm not saying that they don't speed there. I think we're concerned about general speeding above and beyond posted speed limits. And
okay, so
how do we solve that question is probably something for that we continue to work on and for another time.
So set a speed limit or set a speed bump on Schoolhouse Hill Road, and try not to take the walkers and the runners and the people that are handicapped that use that road regularly. And they have not been able to draw the attention of the select board.
Yes, this is the first I've heard of it, Judy. So
No.
Can we?
Okay.
We're on a really big topic right now.
I get that. But you don't get to say that. You don't get to say, this is the first I've heard of it. Sorry. I'm good. Done. Thank you.
Okay. Dan.
Yeah, I was just going to say it. Unfortunately, asking what we're going to do about systemic racism as a board, then asking other questions that try to distract us from that is really not helping the cause for me. But I did want to say, I'm silent tonight because that was an outstanding presentation, and I'm overwhelmed and moved by what you're doing and what you're saying. And I'm silent because I have no idea what to say. The only thing I can do is commit that I'm going to learn as much as I possibly can, I obviously have a background like everybody does in growing up and where we're from and racism that we understand and how we understand ours. But systemic racism in Vermont, I don't understand right now, but I'm very, very moved with this presentation. And the only thing I can do as a select board member right now is not commit to anything. The only thing I can do is commit myself to being better and trying to understand and moving through this long process, which is not going to be quick. And I'm just committing myself to that. And again, I'm sorry, I don't have anything that I can add.
Lindsay.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, you know, I think we're at the point in the process where this is going to get very, very uncomfortable. And I think that's a good thing. I think that means we're doing work that needs doing. And I think some of that discomfort is going to come from, you know, all of our different backgrounds and not understanding, you know, when somebody says, you know, as the conversation went earlier, that, you know, funding the police department is perpetuating racism. You know, from my personal experience, that makes no sense because I have a very specific personal experience, but from my husband's experience, it makes a lot of sense. He has had 2 or 3 times the interactions with police officers that I have had, and he's lived in the country for half the amount of time. He has never had the experience of needing to call the police, thank goodness. So that means every time he was interacting with the police, it's because he just looked suspicious or somebody thought he was suspicious. So every interaction he has had has been negative. So I think from his perspective, saying, you know, this is perpetuating racism makes a lot of sense. Or police don't make him feel safe would make a lot of sense were he to say that. He's not here, so I'm not going to speak for him. But, you know, I think, as Dan was saying, the important thing is to understand that we all have different backgrounds. We're all bringing something different to the table, but our understanding is going to be imperfect, and we're going to feel uncomfortable. And I am also committing to listening, to learning as much as I can. What Judy was saying earlier about, you know, reading, you know, I'm happy to continue this journey and continue to learn. From a mental health standpoint, and this is just my personal experience, I unfortunately this had nothing to do with the Middlebury Police Department, but I did have the experience of needing to call police due to a family member's mental breakdown. And I wound up sobbing to the dispatcher because it occurred to me that the officer would have every right to just shoot my family member. He's somebody who had weapons in the home, and he was clearly unwell and was making threats in public. And that experience really changed my perception of what we're funding and why, because that was my only option. The only help I could get from my family member was to call somebody with a gun. And I would have really appreciated a different choice, or for a social worker to be at least with that officer. Everything turned out fine in this instance, but I'm painfully aware that it may not have. So I'm open to this conversation. I'm open to thinking about different ways to best serve every member of our community. I don't have all the answers, but I'm really grateful to Ideal Middlebury for the work that they've done so far, and I look forward to continuing to learn about this topic. That's it.
Thank you, Lindsay. Joanna, you've had your hand up a couple times here.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to say really briefly, thank you all for listening with open minds and open hearts. I want to second Judy's suggestion of the book, How to Be Less Stupid About Race. I have read a ton of books on race and critical race theory, and that is one of my absolute favorites, and I can't recommend it highly enough. And just really quick, one of the most common misconceptions about defunding police and police abolition is that we are going to take this exact same world that we have, the levels of homelessness, the levels of addiction, the levels of domestic assault and sexual assault, and we're just going to take away the police. And there you are with this same world that we have minus the police. That's not what police defunding is about. Police defunding is about how do we make our communities whole? How do we have vibrant, healthy communities where people have what they need, where people aren't struggling with these really terrible choices like Lindsay just described, of having a family member who needs help and literally having no other choice except calling an armed officer of the state in. And imagine that, imagine if Lindsay's, she said she was so aware of how wrong that could have gone. And you have like a tiny inkling of communities that have historically been persecuted by police, Indigenous people, Black people, and disabled people. People with mental illness are among the highest rates of people that endure police violence. So it's not about just this exact same world that we have minus the police. It's about where do we put our resources to make a community that's where everyone can thrive.
Nick?
Well, I think in going back, the one question Judy raised that I think we have an answer for, listening to everybody, is what are we doing about it? Well, I'm going to use the analogy of what I do professionally. I'm an engineer. I've worked in cultural heritage properties for 35 years. As an engineer, the first thing one does before you solve a problem is you understand it. You don't create a solution without understanding the problem. And so, to answer the question, what are we doing about it? Well, we're doing exactly right now. We're learning. What you've done is helped us learn something, and we'll continue to learn more so that ultimately we're not trying to guess as to what the answer is, but we're able to do it in a solid and objective manner that is beneficial for all. One of the issues with a lot of social service is that most of those are actually done by the state. So is it safe to assume that a lot of this presentation of what you're giving is actually going to our legislators? Because they control so much of the social service budget that we don't. Our officers respond to situations that quite honestly, they really don't want to, but there's no other alternative for them right now. So it's a much bigger issue for us to solve, but it doesn't mean it's not solvable. In fact, if we ever think it's not solvable, then we're foolish. So again, this is a continued step on learning. I actually just finished a really interesting book here by Eugene Robinson, who's a columnist for the Washington Post. Actually, a columnist I've always enjoyed reading his work, and he's got a really good insight, I think, on society observation. And the book is called Disintegration, and that's one I would suggest reading as well. But anyway, thank you for your time.
Heather?
I just wondered if Joanna or the other members of IDL, Matthew, I'm sorry, I'm going to pronounce your name wrong. I apologize.
Janae.
Janae, thank you. If you wouldn't mind putting together a short list that you share with Kathleen of what books you would recommend the most, because there is so much out there. I personally don't have a whole lot of extra time in my life, so if you could give us the top 3 choices, that would be helpful for me. Thank you.
Chris, is there anyone else with their hand raised?
Yes, Brian, we have one other hand raised from Chris Robbins.
Chris, okay.
Chris, go ahead.
Hello.
Hi, Chris.
Hi. Some of the things you said reminded me of a time about 15 years ago when I was living in an apartment in Middlebury and upstairs there was a couple who used to fight in the evening, and I would hear these crashing and banging sounds and somebody begging, please don't do this, please stop. And I thought, this is bad. So I called Women Safe, and they said, well, we can't do anything. You'd have to call the police. And that seemed like a really drastic step, so I never did it. I feel guilty about that, but it'd be nice if there was someone else who could respond to things like that. But the thing I wanted to say was, one thing to read is the report of the U.S. Justice Department in 2015 when they investigated the situation in Ferguson, Missouri. And they found that it's not just a matter of how much the police budget is, but the source of it. So they were saying that police departments that derive their funding from fines and fees generally behave badly, and they solve fewer crimes, and they arrest more people for minor offenses. And this is one of the quotes from that report. Court practices exacerbating the harm of unconstitutional police practices and imposing particular hardship upon the most vulnerable residents, especially upon those living in or near poverty. Minor offenses can generate crippling debts, resulting in jail time because of an inability to pay, and result in the loss of a driver's license, employment, or housing. Now, I don't know how the Middlebury Police Department is funded, but it's just something to look at, because it's not just the amount of the budget, but it's where it comes from that makes a difference. And it can get people in cycles of debt, and then they end up in prison. And, it's more complicated than just the amount of money.
Thank you, Chris. Chris English, is there anybody else on that has their hand raised?
No other hands raised at this time, Brian.
Kathleen does. Okay, Kathleen?
I'd just like to follow up to Chris's question about how our police department is funded. Several years ago, the board phased out the small amount of traffic fines that we received, and just last year, it was about $20,000 at its peak from speeding tickets and that type of ticketing. And then last year you phased out $10,000 in parking fines. So those are your two sources of fines for the police department. The other revenue is from property taxes, primarily.
Thank you, Kathleen. So if I could just try to maybe set the stage for future discussion here, and then we could move on. First, I really want to thank the three of you from Ideal Middlebury and your whole team. There was a lot of research in that presentation. It was certainly thought-provoking, and I can tell by the board's response that you've hit us side the head here with some data that we were probably not aware of, and so I think a little period of contemplation, along with our other discussions about systemic racism and how that's manifest, is in order. We have committed, and we're going to continue our process of educating ourselves and becoming more enlightened on this subject. And you were our first step, and thank you very much for playing a key role in getting us going and into the uncomfortable phase where we have to really face it and try to figure out what are those acts that we can do to make Middlebury a more welcome place. And so thank you for your part in that. We're gonna give you a chit so that we can call you back when we're ready for the next round here. So because I know you're deeply committed to trying to help us along this path. So thank you.
Thanks for listening.
So with that, we should discuss our board retreat and community engagement on anti-racism. And in our packet, Kathleen had made an effort to reach out to to a number of a couple parties to serve as facilitators, I guess, Kathleen.
So yes, I reached out and have had an email exchange with the Peace and Justice Center of Vermont, which was one of the agencies or mediators, facilitators that the Ideal Middlebury had provided as a resource. And I think we're having some promising discussions about setting up a facilitated retreat for the select board to dive more deeply into the issue of systemic racism and its impact on our community. I also added to the discussion that the board would like to learn more about strategies and policy tools used in municipalities to address systemic racism. As the presentation by Ideal Middlebury has shown us tonight, it takes us a lot of time to pull something together to facilitate the discussion. So I'll keep working with them. I know that the board was eager to have a retreat the last week of October, first week of November, and we'll work with that in mind, but don't know how realistic that is.
Kathleen, I reached out to the college also, and what I found is that they have a reading list themselves amongst their senior leadership group, and they're more than happy to share that with us. It also includes podcasts, so that for those that are on the move and maybe aren't reading while they're on the move, but they could listen to these podcasts. But it's all foundational for generating discussion. And that would be potentially a format that we could pursue, where we had some of those readings maybe a little bit shorter than a complete book. But I started some of the ones. I had asked Sue to share with me, and I was very surprised to find, just the definition of systemic racism. I think it would really clarified. One of the articles really clarified that, and then I was listening to some of the podcasts while I was on the move, and I found them to be very good, and they were from public, well funded, well researched organizations. So I think they select their reading list pretty carefully. So it's another source for readings for us. I've set up to meet with them. They have the trustees meeting coming up, and so it doesn't work to meet and discuss how we could collaborate on this education process until after the trustees meeting. But after that, I thought that you and I could get with them. Kathleen, Miguel would be a participant in that also at the college, and see if there's something that maybe we could do together too, given that they have committed to doing something quite similar.
That sounds promising.
Heather?
When you were speaking, Brian, it just gave me an idea that maybe some way the board can move forward slowly on this is to create a kind of little book group amongst ourselves, where we choose something to read and we have a discussion about it amongst us. It just occurred to me while you were talking that maybe that's one way we can go forward. So anyway, I don't know what other idea, certainly something we can think about and talk about, but maybe twice a year we schedule a special meeting to talk about something related to race that we've all read and how we can apply it to Middlebury.
I think Victor, in our discussion that we had a couple months back, helped me. It's the path of enlightenment, and you don't get there overnight. You have to commit to the education process and to doing it with an open mind. And so I think it's something that we need to have a longer term perspective, but there, as along that path, hopefully there are things that we can identify that we could lead. And some of that, some of the stuff I've already read talks about how, and actually it was brought out by Ideal that there's even potentially things written into current codes that are discriminatory that haven't been pulled out. And so along that path, if we're at least cognizant of it as we see things, we might find that there are things that we can create that knock down the systemic walls that have been erected over time. I don't know. Just trying to process it myself as we go through this.
Brian, just quickly also, I started listening to the podcast, Nice White Parents. So if somebody wanted to add that to their list, I haven't gotten very far in the podcast myself yet, but that is one I have started listening to.
I listened to the first 3 so far. It's crazy when you think about how we create these unknowingly, unwittingly, we create these really bad situations.
Heather, what podcast was that?
It's called Nice White Parents.
It's talking about the New York City integration and how just where you build a school, for instance, can have a tremendous impact on disadvantaging people.
And also kind of how, as white people, we think we're helping and we think we're doing the right thing, and we're just totally not. We're just so far off the mark, and I haven't even gotten very far in it. So,
there's
anyway,
numerous examples about that, Heather. So I think we start maybe then by getting some reading lists out, and I think I'd like to have everybody just commit to trying to get some time on whether it's reading or podcast, but just exposing ourselves to this discussion, and it's being held at a national level. There's just so much information out there. So find the format that's best, but try to get exposed to the discussion, and it'll some of it will break down some what you thought were just the norms. Maybe you'll start to see it as in a different light. So we'll wait to hear from Kathleen as far as our offsite, because we need I think for it to be effective, we should have some sort of a facilitator or educator as part of that process. Unless, if we can't come up with one, maybe we commit to we could create one and have it basically be that first book club, Heather suggested, so that we're not waiting indefinitely, but let's hold and see if we can get a facilitator to help us through our first one. Nick?
And there was a couple of things that Kathleen said. Is one thing is a facilitator that's going to help us understand how to deal with the issues that we can control, and that's specifically I'm referring to what we as a board can do in this fine town. And so I would like that to be one of the key emphasis of the effort, because again, it's what we can control. and secondarily is spending the time to get it right. The idea of if we rush into something, we don't get it right, then we haven't solved anything. So if it takes a little longer to have our session, then so be it. That's just a much more logical and better way to address any problem.
Victor?
Yeah, well, I think what Dick said is right, and I mean, we should have a facilitator, and we have to take our time and set it up right. I would hope also that we could have this in person. It'd be very hard to have a discussion like this with a facilitator on Zoom. And I think this should be something that we should try to aim at. Not rush it, but see if we can work it out. Because this is a very important issue, and we need to get it right.
Okay. So with that charge, I'm going to move to the next item. Bring Dan in. Number of public works items.
Okay, I should be unmuted now.
We got you, Dan.
Okay, here we go. All right, good evening. So a couple things on the Public Works arena we want to look at tonight. And while I talk through this, Kathleen, do you have the ability to put up that sketch with the colors on it from the wastewater treatment plant site? So there's as you know, there's a couple projects going on down there. One was a water main project that's basically complete. Two was the decommissioning work, dismantling the tanks and other items. And then the other part is the building reuse project. So we got looking at this with the subcontractor actually for VMS. And our contractor for the decommissioning, that's Parker Enterprises. They're the excavation company for those two projects. And we got talking about the asphalt, trench patching and paving for those three separate projects. If you look at the sketch, the area that's a little blue line that goes left to right, that is where the water main went, and that would have a trench patch. That has a trench patching component in that project. The green boxes, somewhat green boxes overlaid on the pink, are part of the new aprons that would be put down in front of the control building. That's the one to the westerly bottom, and then the upper part one is for the police cruiser parking garage. So we got looking at this and said, geez, for some more money, but at lower cost per unit, we could pave the pavement, replace the pavement in pink. And so the contractor looked at it with the paving company and then came back and gave us a proposal for the redoing the pink area. So what it amounts to is there'll be a deduct of $18,180 from the VMS contractor contract. That is the company that's doing the reuse project. And then there'd be a credit of $16,090 and change from the decommissioning water main project. That's Parker Enterprises, because they have not done that work yet. And then the addition would be, so there's a deduct of a total of those two projects of about 34,000, 34,000. And then the pink area was an additional $109,460 to do all of that. So we talked about it at the Public Works Committee, and they felt that that was a good way to go. Basically, what it amounts to is you're getting about 5 times the pavement replaced for about 3 times the cost. So just because you're getting rid of the costly trench paving unit costs and doing larger areas, there's a significant cost savings. And then the other thing we brought up, Heather asked me to look at what would it cost to pave the impound lot, and that project has been brought up many years in a row, and we've never taken it on just because of funding. So that area is what Kathleen is just moving her pointer around in the red. So we would join that project along with the other two and do it all at once. So Parker's price for both projects, the impound lot and the pink area, is removing the existing asphalt completely. So you're looking at the east end, about in line with the east end of the PD building, right there, and then goes all the way, S-curvy through the area over to the left-hand edge, the west edge. That's where the water main project ended. So they would remove all that pavement and then put in 4 inches of new asphalt. The impound lot would be regraded and then overlaid with 3 inches of asphalt. That is currently gravel right now. So Parker came to me today with a price of $23,108.20 to do that impound lot. So the net change is $98,297.75 to do this whole revamp of eliminating the trench paving and repaving the pink area and the park and the impound lot. So so that's what I bring to you tonight. Funding would be split between the reuse project and what I'm calling a decommission lawsuit fund, but it's actually decommissioning and water main project, which is paid out of the sewer fund because it is their water main. So if you concur, then I'll need a motion to do that, and then at a subsequent board meeting, I'll bring all the paperwork together in front of you because it's going to take several documents to tie it all together.
Heather.
I'm sorry, Dan, what did you say that the cost for the impound lot was?
23,108 and
23,108.
Right.
Okay. And so I think if my memory is right, Chief Hanley had been putting that in the capital budget for a number of years at like 25,000. So we're kind of where we thought it would cost us.
At least been 10 years, I think.
Yeah. I mean, what a perfect time to do it. So what about funding for that part of it? I imagine Chief Hanley doesn't have the money necessarily in his budget. Can the reuse project absorb the cost of that, or are we pushing on the limit of that funding?
Well, it could probably absorb the 23,000. What I think we can do is, split it up between the reuse project, the decommissioning fund, and the water main replacement. That's a capital line item. So I can get you some numbers on that. But there's the decommissioning fund has somewhere in the $190,000 left in that pigeonhole. So it would be up to you as a board to decide to use that fund for, and whatever amount you decide.
Dan, all the extra that's in pink that we're going to put a new coat on, what's the shape of that right now?
It's pretty rough in places. The portions that are outside of that are in pretty good shape because we did some water main work some years ago, and so that portion that's off to the east is in very good shape. It's been dug up by several water main breaks, and the back in I think it was 97 98, I think the force main project that went out to the new wastewater plant went through there. So there's a couple different trench, patches that are in that. It's pretty rough and lumpy bumpy.
So you're going to bring us back how that's all being funded, or are you looking for action on that?
Well, I'll need your approval to proceed. Actually the pavement is scheduled for next week. They're trying to get it in before it gets cool and when the contract is available. So you can approve the process, and then I'll bring the physical paperwork, via Zoom, of course, to you to accept.
Other board member thoughts? Questions? Nick?
Dan, if we don't do it, what do you think the life expectancy of that pavement is?
Well, you'll have to do the green boxes.
Yes.
And the blue boxes this fall.
Yes.
To trench pavement. And now you've got patches and other patches. And so the reality is, when would you go back? And you'd have to reprogram that, and then you'd have those costs those additional higher costs per unit for those trench patches, and then going back and doing it. So
that's kind of what I'm getting at, is when would we go back, and when we would go back, would it be within the life expectancy of that pavement?
Well, it depends on what you want to, what you want to suffer through. When I got to tell you, when you get done with this cruiser garage project, it's looking really cool. The control building is going to look nice, and you're going to walk down and go like, oh man, why did we do that? It's kind of one of those things, to finish it up, make it look great, and move on.
Well, I look at the last 10 years or so, or 12 years I've been on the board, we've done a lot of major capital improvement projects because they were deferred, and we ended up with a wreckage. And so we ended up having to do more than what we would have done maybe otherwise had it been taken care of earlier. So at this point, it's in following with that philosophy, it's wise to just do this now and get it right, and go forward, continue to take care of things.
Yeah, it will never be cheaper than now.
That's exactly what I'm seeing. Well,
Kathleen,
I can't think of any reason not to do it.
How does this look from your perspective, budget-wise, Kathleen?
I think with what Dan's saying, that we should be able to fit it in between the existing sources of funding and making up any difference with existing capital funds.
Any more questions, thoughts, Lindsay?
Yeah, just quickly, would doing the impound lot mean that some other project or some other facet of this project can't happen? Or are we going to be able to come up with, are all the needs going to be met everywhere? Never, but.
Put it this way, for decommissioning funds, there's nothing on the near-term radar that money needs to be reserved for. Maybe if you thought the priority was, keeping a pigeonhole for, future wastewater treatment plant, costs, but that's going to be a few years down the road, and there's all kinds of funding variables of that. So there isn't anything really short term that fund is needed for. So it's a good fit.
I'd be willing to make a motion to approve the paving project as presented by Dan, with future money and change orders to come, to pave the lot, including, and pave everything in pink on his diagram, including the impound lot.
Second.
So moved and seconded. Is Chief on the edge of his seat? Anybody know?
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he was pretty excited about it.
I know, I can't remember a time when I was either on the infrastructure committee or on the board when that was not on his budget, so,
It's been a long time.
yeah.
Also, when it was not on the budget and when it wasn't also the first thing that we cut out of the budget.
Okay, any other questions or thoughts? We ready to vote? Okay, all in favor of the motion signify with a thumbs up. Looks like it's unanimous. Chief, you aren't going to believe it. Yes, there is a Santa Claus.
Yep. Thank you.
Sometimes if you wait for the right timing, huh?
It's all in the timing, right?
It makes sense. Yeah, 15 years later, before you retire though, Chief.
The plow drivers will appreciate it, believe me.
I
So
know.
the tow truck operators.
Yeah.
And we'll see a decrease in your budget for having to maintain that gravel impound lot, right?
Yeah, yeah. Every year we have to pull out weeds and do all kind of stuff.
Okay. What's next, Dan?
Okay, next is request from Bill Kernan to replace the pressure washer that is down at Public Works for washing equipment. He went out and got the one that we have is got to be purchased in 2001 or 2 because I remember being here when we bought it. And it just hit me. I think we paid $3,700 for that. So these prices are not significantly greater. But anyway, he went out and got pricing from 3 companies: Main Oxy Wash, Power Wash Sales, and Power Eagle Pressure Washer Company. I think it was Heather. You may have asked how did that compare with GPM and pressure from the one we had, and they're all above what we have, so they're certainly adequate in performance. The low price was from Main Oxy / Linux Cleaning Systems. That price was $4,106 and looks like 20 cents.
10 cents.
10 cents. Yeah. Okay. Yep. And the other 2 was almost $4,600 from Power Washer with a $250 option on a hose reel, and the higher price was $5,390 from Power Eagle Pressure Washer. So he's requesting the board to purchase a new pressure washer from Main Oxy for $4,106.10.
I'll move to award a contract to Main Oxy for the purchase of a new pressure washer and 100 feet of hose at a total cost of $4,106.10.
Second.
Okay, any questions or comments? All in favor signify with a thumbs up. Hey, Dan, I was curious why they didn't get one from Houston's Farm Supply. They have a good HOTC. How do we go about making sure all local companies get a chance to bid on stuff like that?
I don't know how Bill approached it. I can't answer that, but you have a good point.
Just, I'm not going to hold this one up, but for future, it'd be nice to know that our
I'll
local guys get a shot at that.
Yep. We'll
All
make
right.
them aware.
Finance and maintenance agreement, Dan?
So every time there's like a class 1 paving project in our town, any town, VTrans has a kind of blanket finance and maintenance agreement. It's quite lengthy, and I won't go through it all, of course, but it basically defines the project. In this case, it's Vermont 30, Vermont 125, and US Route 7. And so this agreement, the first cover page and the second page are mostly the meat of it. But it says that it defines the project. It defines says that the town wants to have it done. It also says that the state acts as a benefit to the town. You know, even though these are state and federal routes, they are within the town's jurisdiction. So they make the formality of acting in our behalf. Top of page 2, number 1 talks about allocation of funds. Basically, 81% of it is state funds. 81% is federal funds, and 18.92% is state funds. That adds up to 100%. So therefore, our share is 0. And then there's several pages of technical assistance and cooperation between state and town, and so on and so forth. Pretty straightforward boilerplate stuff, but they do require the board to agree to the finance and maintenance agreement. So I will need your approval of that so Kathleen can sign it and then get it back to the state. They are still anticipating, I should say the reason they want this soon is they are in final stages of contract development, and this is part of that process that defines who the responsibilities are. And yes, they continue to move forward for a award probably in December, I believe, and then get ready to go when the weather breaks in the spring.
Dan, are we going to be able to get our water project done and before they do this?
That's the plan. I meet with Robert Clark from Otter Creek Engineering on Friday, and we're going to talk about a final schedule on getting that out to bid. We want to get it out to bid soon. I know with all this COVID issues that
yeah, I still have a little more left.
that contractors want to see what's out there, and the bidding's going to be better now than it will be, maybe in February. So we want to get out there early.
Okay. And it does include Route 7. I didn't see Route 7 in the finance and maintenance agreement. They are going to do that for us, right?
Yeah, the title, I don't know if you've got that in front of you, but it says witnesses right on the first page, second paragraph. They have the Middlebury STP PC 203 parentheses 3 and NHPC 20 parentheses 4.
Yes.
That includes this Route 7.
It does. Okay. All right. Because that's a major need for us. Get the Court Street that as we're not worn well.
Right.
I'll move to authorize Town Manager Kathleen Ramsey to sign the finance and maintenance agreement for the Class 1 paving project on Route 30 and Route 125 and Court Street, scheduled for 2021.
Second.
Any questions, comments? Seeing none, all in favor, signify with thumbs up. All right. Okay, thanks, Dan.
Okay, you're welcome.
This will be Chief here, yeah. Chief.
Yeah, here we go. A year ago, we awarded a bid to Yipe Stripes to do the full upfit of a police cruiser. Prior to that, we do it by pieces parts. And it just became overly complex. Years ago, DPW used to do the upfit on a car. It took half a day when you had to put in a radio and a light bar on the roof. Now with the electronics, it requires people that are certified to do it by the people that make these various things that we have to put into the cars. Anyway, Yipe Stripes got the bid last year to do the upfit on the car. Instead of us ordering the components and having to store them and ship them places, Yipe Stripes gets them. They get them at their wholesale cost rather than the retail cost that we're paying for the equipment. So the actual cost for the equipment is a little lower. So there's two in front of you. One is for the upfit of the car and the equipment. This was the Ford Explorer, the hybrid that we have. It's got a slightly different body type, and none of the equipment from the 2014 Explorer that were traded in will fit in this car. So we had to go from scratch and get new equipment. This year would have been a year that we replaced one of the light bars on the car, which inflated the cost a bit, as well as put a new radio in it. Our old radio was a pre-narrowband car. It was in the SRO's car. We didn't need the full range in that car. This is going to a frontline car, so we need to replace the radio. And that's what you have, the two purchase orders. One for $2,324.50 for the radio, and the other, the $12,423 for the upfit.
Questions of Chief? Pleasure of the board.
I'll make a motion to award a contract to Yipes Auto and Graphics for the fit-up of the police department's new Ford Explorer at a total cost of $12,423.46.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, we had the second purchase order for the acquisition of the radio. That's a separate purchase order, $2,324.50, and that'll be installed up at Yite Stripes.
Okay, and that's below that $3,000 limit, Chief, so we don't actually need to approve that.
Okay.
Okay. Seeing no more questions or comments, all in favor of the supporting the Yite Stripes outfit, signify by thumbs up. Okay. All right, thanks, Chief.
You're welcome.
Okay, Kathleen.
So we have a request for the purchase of 4 aeromotive slip ring assemblies for the wastewater treatment facility under the sole source provision of the purchasing policy at a total cost of $6,290.36 as outlined in Bob Wells' memo to you.
Okay. Questions of the board?
Well, this is an exciting product to go along and put a motion in for, isn't it?
Pleasure of the board?
It's necessary.
Yeah, it is. I know. I move to award a contract to Brake Products Incorporated for the purchase of 4 aeromotive slip ring assemblies for the wastewater treatment facility under the sole source purchases provision of the purchasing policy at a total cost of $6,290.36.
Second.
Questions? All in favor, signify with thumbs up. Okay.
Thank you.
There was a bunch of information in our packet about the Act 250 application from the Agency of Transportation at the Middlebury Airport, and it's for clear cutting some acreage at the end of the runway. And we agreed to talk about it and put it on our agenda for this week to see if the board desired to take a position on this. The Planning Commission has taken a position and made comments. The Conservation Commission has done the same. The Tree Committee has done the same. And basically their position and what they're asking of us is to support them, is that we don't see the necessity for clear cutting, that there are other options that have less impact in the near term and is still effective and probably would do a better job of managing wildlife, the other economics impacts, water, the bats, and a number of other wildlife that travel through that corridor. So open it up for discussion of the board. Nick.
Well, I suppose the one overlying question is do these alternatives that are viable, do they comply with the FAA's requirements for approach surface? Because it's the reason they're doing this in the first place. And is there a way that they will guarantee that they will be maintained so that the safety's there for everybody over there? If that's the case, then let's see the other alternatives. But that's still the overriding question as to whether this has to be done. I know historically, V-Trans has let those trees get taller than they should have been, and it did create safety hazards in the past. So we need to make sure that doesn't occur. Not that it wouldn't with a clear cut either, but if there's a better way to do it, then that's great.
And I think that was posed as a question in one of the letters. I can't remember if that was the Conservation Commission or who, but is what's the rationale for it? As I understood it, this overlays some of the other cutting, the selective cutting that was done previously, Kathleen?
I did not attend the pre-hearing, but Jen Murray, who is in our audience, has raised her hand and will respond.
Well, that'd be good. Good evening, Jen.
Hi there. Thanks for taking this up tonight. So in response to Nick's question, there is a maintenance plan for this area, which is on the north side of Munson Road. So it's outside the fenced-in limits of the airport on the north side. There is a maintenance plan in place now for maintaining the avigation easement, making sure that the trees don't grow too tall according to the height in the avigation easement. And this would be a modification to that maintenance plan to make sure to clear cut the trees instead of selectively harvesting them. So the trees have been selectively harvested in the past, we think. No trees were supposed to be cut there at all. So Josh Donabedian said at the pre-hearing conference that would actually constitute a violation of their existing Act 250 permit if trees have been removed. So there's been a site visit scheduled for the 22nd. We'll be going out there, but the attorney for Mr. Pooh said that he saw, stumps and people clearing trees when he was there. So I don't know if that helps at all.
Questions?
It partially helps with the plan, if that's the case. But again, is this something that the FAA is mandating, or is this something that is kind of going beyond what the mandate is?
It's going beyond what the mandate is.
Okay.
So the FAA requires that they comply with the avigation easements.
Right.
Controls the height of the trees.
Correct.
And they weren't going to cut that lot at all, but they decided that because there is federal money available for clear cutting right now.
Oh, okay.
And because it would be more convenient for them, they're going to come back and modify those terms, which we all agreed on in these contentious hearings for the original Act 250 at the airport. They're going to modify that maintenance plan for something for their own convenience and ease.
Okay, so this is a convenience thing more than an FAA mandate on the approach surface.
Yeah, there was someone from V-Trans there last week that said that it was difficult to have to create a whole new contract with a forester to come and perform like the forestry management services. I guess I'm kind of skeptical that it's that hard to have a new contract with a forester when we've got so many in East Middlebury.
Skepticism is shared.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there questions? Thoughts, pleasure of the board?
I'll make a motion to sign the select board letter to District Number 9 Environmental Commission Chair Fred Bazer, requesting reconsideration of the plan outlined in V-Trans Act 250 application to clear cut trees in the navigation easement at the north end of the runway at Middlebury State Airport.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table. Are there any questions or comments on that before we vote? Lindsay.
Yeah, I guess my question is, if we were to not do this, if we were to just let them clear cut, would we be setting some sort of precedent going forward?
We actually have no authority. This isn't, this doesn't fall under local zoning because it's being termed a safety improvement. So all that you're giving them are comments that will help the Act 250 District Commission make a decision on whether or not to approve the application or approve the application with conditions based on their Act 250 criterion. And so the three criterion under consideration now are criterion 8, which is aesthetic impacts, criterion 8A, which is wildlife, and then criterion 10, which is conformance with our town plan. So hopefully the letter captures your thoughts on those criterion.
Okay, thank you.
It's actually a safety thing. There's tends to be no question. The FAA is not flexible at all on that.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, are we ready for a vote on this? All in favor of the motion signify with a thumbs up. Farhad, are you for it or against it?
I did.
Oh, you did, okay. Okay, so was it unanimous then, I think? Okay, all right, thank you.
So that letter has been prepared and is available for the board to stop by at its convenience to sign.
Okay. Farhad was diligently getting ready for his check warrants.
All right. By the authority of Select Board granted on April 28, 2020, I have reviewed and approved total expenditures in the amount of $2,838,397.69, consisting of $2,627,738.64 for accounts payable and $210,659.05 for payroll for the period of September 23 to October 13, 2020, and I move the board's approval of payment of these expenditures.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify with a thumbs up. Okay. Kathleen. Your mic is muted, Kathleen. Kathleen. Kathleen.
Sorry about that. We covered the first two things on the agenda on my town manager's notes, which were the speeding on South Street and the Riverwalk. Just wanted to note that the notes from the September 17th Addison County COVID-19 Recovery Forum are available, and they're definitely worth a look through for some valuable insights. And then finally, I'm glad to see that Jen is still here, so we can thank her for her good work, as always, on the bike kiosk and the bike rack and the information kiosk that were constructed with a Better Connections Quick Build for Health program grant. So, and in their temporary locations, we have the information kiosk, which is in Cannon Park, and the bike rack shelter, which is down by the Cross Street Bridge.
Cool.
And I have your current correspondence for the last couple of weeks, which is available on request. And that's all I have.
Okay. So we'll go to board member concerns. Victor?
Nothing.
Heather?
Sorry. Just going back to the South Street and the request for the two, what do you call them? Driver feedback radar. Anyway, and a little bit to, I think, what Judy may have been trying to get to, in that we put one up on South Street And what about those that are complaining on Seminary Street and Washington Street and Schoolhouse Hill Road and Munger Street and my road? So how do we justify putting up 2 on South Street? I'm just trying to grapple with how we address the issues everywhere, and just thinking a little bit about what the feedback might be if we put 2 on South Street and none anywhere else. And was just thinking, is there any grants for this type of work, or these type of units or not? Anyway, not going to be solved tonight, just something I've been thinking about since we met. The infrastructure committee met on Thursday, and just trying to think about how we might solve the problem without relying so much on the police department. And I certainly don't have any answers. I'm just, my road is unsafe. I won't let my kids walk or bike on my road, without my presence. And even then, I got rear-ended, 100 feet from my driveway this summer. So it's an issue everywhere. And, but it's late. I won't go on anymore.
Heather, what's the speed limit on your road?
I think it's 40. I think.
It's 30 on Airport Road, and people go 50 where I live. And most of these repeat offenders are people who are trying to make deadlines, like FedEx drivers and UPS drivers. They speed more than anybody else, I've noticed.
So I often sit in my driveway waiting for the bus to come, and also, in the morning and the afternoon, and watch people coming down the hill by my house and around the corner. And in my observant, it's not ever anyone driving commercially. It's passenger vehicles, light trucks that are the issue. So I don't know what, I don't have an answer. I just am just concerned that we put 2 of these up on South Street, and then what do we do for the rest of the streets? And how, is the money better? Like, do we increase I know here we had this big long conversation about decreasing the police department budget, but do we add an officer to the police budget whose sole job is, traffic and enforcement of that? And what does that cost us a year versus 20 of these, driver feedback radar? I don't know. More discussion for another time.
Well, I certainly think if you put up driver feedback on every single road, they're going to be ignored significantly. I mean, you just get used to them.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. And I think that's part of the reason for the mobile units, so that the location of the unit changes and it doesn't become a, just like the rapid flashing beacons for pedestrian crossing, Yeah.
Move it around, right?
Right.
Kathleen, can we get maybe from Chief a list of all the streets? I guess I hadn't heard Schoolhouse Hill Road before, but I'm here in Munger Street. I mean, there's a lot of roads that have not typically been the ones like South Street and Weybridge Street. So if we could get a list of all the streets, and then maybe ideas of do we need to look at bump outs on all these streets? We can't staff all the police officers that we have allocated now. He has a hard time keeping it staffed fully. So I don't know if adding a police officer would even be feasible. So,
Addison County Regional Planning also did a planning study several years back about traffic calming measures that municipalities can take, and I'll dig that out and see if there might be some useful information there.
okay, thanks, Kathleen. Anything else, Heather? Okay, Farhad?
I'm good, thanks.
Okay, Nick?
No, I think, Heather, you've hit it right. I mean, this is, how many of these things can we put out there? The solution, this is another one of those, it's not a fast, it's a long-term solution in traffic calming. My own street is one that we see that on routinely as far as speeding. So thanks for the thought on that. And it's a longer discussion. My question is kind of when I brought up before, just curious, where are we on the master plan? It would be nice to sort of get an update presentation on that, and then what does it look like going forward? Thinking of a situation is now that the heavy bridge work is done downtown, what if a developer and our development team came along with an idea for one of the vacant sites or one of the buildings in town that would be worthy of a major rehabilitation? Could they proceed? And could they be a beta site or a beta test to see how the master plan works? And if it's successful, find out where the strengths are and where the weaknesses might be, so that it can be one of the elements to help pull us on beyond this COVID and beyond the endurance that people have had to make for the bridge project. So I would really like to see an update status and even a presentation on where do we go from here.
So Jen is still on with us, but when last we spoke, we were on track for having a full presentation on October 27th.
Okay, that'd be great. Thanks.
Kathleen, do we need to start that meeting earlier, or we'll look at our...
At this point, it does look like it's going to be a big one, Brian.
Yeah.
Well, I won't be able to start until the normal time anyway, because this is I've got a critical Park Service project that I'm going to be I have to be at. So 7 o'clock is even going to push it for me.
We'll have to look at the schedule. Maybe if it's too full, Nick, maybe we could do the routine stuff so you could jump in after the routine stuff.
That'd be great. Thanks, Brian.
We'll get with everybody. Okay. Dan?
I have nothing. Thank you.
Okay. Lindsay?
Yeah, I thinking about the traffic, and I don't want to go on about it too much because we all want to go to bed. But I'm also wondering, Chief Hanley keeps saying, roads that are really designed to go 40 or 50, but the speed limit is 25. And I'm wondering if it's worth looking at it, from the point of design or whatever. Obviously that's a very slow solution, but should we be being proactive about that as we're doing road work? Thinking about that at that point. And I don't know what the policy looks like, or, sometimes it's not our road, it's a state road, but at any rate, that was a thought I had. Yeah. And then I had another thought and I've completely lost it. Nope, it's gone. Sorry.
Right.
It's late. Another time.
Okay. Well, actually, that's the design and the median. That's the median traffic speed. Those are the issues that we've had in East Middlebury to reducing the speed, and it was really pretty amazing that in the end got a reduced speed commitment out of the state, but it took quite an act, and I think it's a wide road. The average people go faster. Now we're going to get a reduced speed limit. How do we enforce that speed, and how do we get people to actually go that speed? Because exactly what Chief said. So I think it's going to be a big issue if we're getting this many problems, and something that probably Kathleen can get us some info on, but it might have to go to the infrastructure committee because it's going to need funding to, and it always requires then some level of prioritization, and that'll not be fun. Good luck, Heather.
Talk about difficult conversations.
Yeah. Yeah, we had a number of them this evening, but I appreciate everybody staying engaged and you know, certainly a complex period we're going through here. So I'll entertain a motion. I'm a half an hour late getting you out of here, but we had a full schedule, so my apologies.
Motion to adjourn.
Second, and no need to apologize, Brian. It was a good meeting, good discussion.
Okay, all in favor, signify with thumbs up. Okay, we'll adjourn at 9:30. All right, have a good evening, everyone.